right. Welcome, everybody. We're going to get kicked off now. Welcome to, actually, show of hands, who here has been to a Gen AI Collective event before? Who has been to a Gen AI Collective event before? Okay, that's just about everybody. Who here has been to an AI Collective event before? Nobody. I said it in past tense. You are at an AI Collective event. You will be able to raise your hand after this event. Yes. So for those of you that don't know, probably most of you signed up for the event when it looked like this. It was redacted, Gen AI Collective San Francisco. It was a special mystery event, right? You also saw on Monday that we changed it to the human side of AI and announced our huge launch, global launch as the AI Collective. In fact, this is not the only event that we've been doing, the only global launch event. We have 10 celebrations going on around the world this week. We had our first 2 yesterday. We've got 3 more today. It's been so much crazy coordination going on here, and it is so much more than just a rename. So yes, that's the old logo. That's the old name, right? It's right here. This is the new name and the new logo right here. But it's so much more than that. In fact, this has been 6+ months in the making. This is some nice videography we have when we were getting prepared. I think this was back in April or May. And we originally hatched this idea, back in probably August of 2024, as we were starting to open chapters across the US. A lot more stories to tell there. This is actually some cool photos we have of, I think we had 21 packages here, which is all the new swag, all the new socks you see, and these banners and stuff like that we were shipping all around the world a couple weeks ago. In fact, we were so busy, I had to fly out to DC to be with Catherine to get those all shipped out when we were in DC. Craziness. And of course, it was not just me and Catherine and a couple people. This was like a whole team effort. So we had dozens, if not over 100 people helping to make this all possible. Some of them are wearing orange vests here. Can I get a round of applause for everybody who was involved in this? That's Yumi here. That's you, Ash. That's so many other people here who helped make this possible. It was a crazy, crazy all-around effort. So you might be wondering now, why the new name? These are the 2 most important, but because this is SF and this is headquarters and everybody knows Gen AI Collective really well, I'll give you 2 more reasons why, which are maybe a little more surface level. These are the important ones. One is our broadening scope. We've always been events and community. We will continue to always be events and community. That's going to be the heart of what we do. But there is so much more that we're going to be expanding to do going forward. Second is our deepening why. Again, I think we do awesome events and awesome community, but we haven't talked as much about why we exist and what our mission and purpose is. And I want to talk about that a lot more today and going forward. These 2 are a little more surface level. One thing you'll notice about this logo, this was actually made with Midjourney 3, I think was what was current back then. We went through a few hundred iterations to get to this. I think Midjourney did a pretty good job. But you notice there's the Golden Gate Bridge there. That does not work when we're a global community. We learned that pretty quickly as we started expanding to new cities. So that's reason number 3. And last here is one that I didn't really expect. When we first had the name, the Gen AI Collective, we had expected the collective to carry more weight in that 2-part name, right? What we very quickly noticed is that people kept abbreviating us as Gen AI, and we became synonymous with Gen AI, which is kind of cool to become synonymous with this tech term. That being said, we didn't feel like we were leading into the right part of what this community is and what this organization is, which has always been the collective. So with this rename to the AI Collective, I don't think anybody's going to abbreviate us to AI. That would be really cool, actually, if people started calling us AI, but we'll more likely be the collective. So those are the 4. Now, even though that's all happening, this logo, this brand, will always be important. I want to talk a little bit about why that is. This is actually our very first event that we ever hosted, our first living room discussion around the legendary table. This was in February of 2023, a couple months after ChatGPT, right? Just trying to make sense of everything that's going on, this crazy new technology. Little did we know that this would birth hundreds of other events just like it. We enjoyed it so much that we ended up hosting an event the next week and the next week and so forth. This is our 3rd event where we already had over 250 people sign up for the event. This is when we decided to put a little brand name behind it with the Gen AI Collective. We thought it had already outgrown us and obviously become so much more since then. Still, just under 2 months later, we were receiving so much interest that we figured, okay, we had to bring more people to the table. So we went from a single discussion group to 36 discussion groups. And we got the biggest venue we could find at the time. This is a little known, but we were actually called GAI Collective for a little while. Little known fact, we were the GAI Collective. We tried to coin that term before we went to Gen AI. We were so passionate about this that we put up these banners all around the place, trying to get as many people there. We also wanted people when they were at events to meet as many new faces as possible. So we built this whole custom script to generate group numbers. So if you went to one of these events, you had 3 numbers on your name tag, which were the 3 discussion groups you were part of. We really wanted to make sure that you were meeting as many new people as possible. It was really fun. We ended up hosting 40 straight events that first week in 2023. We were always mixing it up. As you see, these are so many different venues. I don't think we ever did the same event twice, and I think that's part of what makes this community so special. This is the last event. This was our 50th event, I think, in that first year. It was crazy, right? And we were all doing this for fun as volunteers with full-time jobs. Pay attention to this graph. This graph's gonna be really important. I'm gonna come back to this a lot in a few minutes. This is really central to our why, and I'm gonna talk more about what that is. Going into 2024, we actually had a concept of a chapter for the first time. Basically what happened is somebody was up in North Bay, this Chris Guest, and said, hey, I love what you guys are doing down in San Francisco. I would love to host one of these myself and start hosting my own series of events. We finally said yes after about a year, and that was the kickoff to what became a beautiful global community. This is our 1-year celebration. We had a Let's Talk AGI meetup. Everybody on their name tags had, what is your timeline? When do you think AGI will arrive? And what is your Pdoom? Hopefully people here know what Pdoom means. It was really fascinating to see what people were putting as their guesses back then. You can see mine was somewhere between 2029 and 2049. I know it's quite a broad range. Most people were 2029 to 2049. And my Pdoom, what is that, under 1%? I'm a very optimistic person if you've gotten to know me. Okay, May 2024. This is about 1 year in. We hosted our first SF demo night. Again, we have so much enthusiasm for hosting the best events possible. You see, we built a whole entire open source app. So when people were at events, and hopefully you've been to an SF demo night, because we've done almost a dozen of them now, and including around the world, you've used the app and you've been able to give feedback to the hundreds now of companies that have demoed their startups across the world. There we go. Throughout 2024, we actually made, it really started to snowball. We built a lot of momentum. We had people reaching out from literally all over the US saying, hey, I would love to start a chapter in my city. We ended up making a list of the top 10 cities in the US for AI, and miraculously, we ended up having people in every single city by the end of that year. Going into this year, 2025, we expanded across the world. You can see that we're now in somewhere between 5 and 10 countries around the world. And it's just been, again, miraculous is the word I would use for how quickly this has grown beyond anything we had ever thought it was, and how much momentum has picked up all on its own. Where we are now, it's a global movement. It's truly turned in beyond just a community, beyond a single living room, to a true global movement. Over 70,000 members. We've hosted over 200 events worldwide, and that's in about 2 years. We have over 100 awesome, mission-driven, fully volunteered team members helping to make this all possible, and we're in 25 plus cities around the world. It all started here in San Francisco, though. This is where it all started, and it specifically started in these very small living room meetups. I bring up this event in particular. This was one of our latest living room discussions. You see, that's still the same table that we hosted our very first event. So even though we're hosting these amazing events now where we are fortunate enough to have hundreds of people, we're still hosting these events, these living room discussions that I think are really the core of what we've always been about. So this week, as you can tell by these awesome banners, marks a new era in our collective history. I'm going to read out really quickly what we are now. The AI Collective is a nonprofit grassroots community uniting 70,000 plus pioneers exploring the frontier of AI in major tech hubs worldwide. That term right there, pioneers exploring the frontier of AI, was chosen very intentionally. I love this term because, at least for me, I don't know if it's the same as for you, I hope it is, it really feels like we are on the frontier of human progress. This field is moving so fast. There is so much opportunity. There's so much to figure out for us all collectively. And I like to think of us as pioneers on that frontier, maybe the gold rush, if you want to think about it as something like that. That's what we're going after. Let me go back to this again. I'm going to start with the first point here, our deepening why. This is something that's very deeply personal to me. In fact, this is something I've been working on for almost a half a decade now. I finally published. My team said I couldn't call it a manifesto. It's a manifesto. It says founding perspective, but it's really a manifesto. You want to go read this. This is Trust in the Age of Acceleration. I think it's a good 6,000 words. It's quite a deep read, but it's something that I've poured a lot of thought and energy to, and it's something I've been thinking about for a long time. Don't worry, that QR code will be up again, and it's on the website as well. So let me start with a little bit of my why, and that I think leads perfectly into why this all exists, but I think it's important you know a little about where I'm coming from. Okay, so my introduction to AI/ML was back when I was in high school. I went to this really nerdy high school called Thomas Jefferson, and we were fortunate enough to have AI classes while I was in high school. It was a pretty crazy school. I ended up taking classes on AI and deep learning, built my first deep learning models back then. I was really into publishing iOS apps. I somehow built the #1 homework app in the world and sold that off, and that was my introduction to technology. In 2020, I ended up working in big tech. My dream company was always to work at Apple, so I went to work at Apple doing AI/ML research and development. As you can imagine, that was pretty awesome. This is a really seminal moment. So this is my senior year of college. I was writing my final paper on something I was passionate about. I decided to write it on GPT-3 and the technological singularity, as you can see right there. Back in 2021, this was shortly after, of course, GPT-3 had come out. And sorry, this mic's a little weird. As I was doing my research, the more I looked into it, the more I realized that this is so much more than just progress in AI. It's so much more than bigger models. These two books are my Bibles of sorts. I highly recommend when you find some time that you go take a read of them. Singularity is Near by Ray Kurzweil and Life 3.0. It changed my perspective on everything that's going on here. And it was around this time that I decided to dedicate my own life, my own career to being part of everything you see today with the development of AGI. Oops, I went to click the wrong button. Specifically this quote. This quote is super important. You see it's by I.J. Good in 1965. It's a huge quote. I won't tell you about the whole thing, but look at that bolded part. The first ultra-intelligent machine is the last invention that man need ever make. That struck me. The first ultra-intelligent machine is the last invention that man need ever make. I think a lot of people in Silicon Valley feel the same way, and it's gripped them in the same way. So with that being said, I headed to the frontier of human progress, and I think that is here in San Francisco. The future is already here. It's just unevenly distributed, and nowhere is it more here than in San Francisco. So Trust in the Age of Acceleration, very intentional title. What is the reason for that title? Let's start with the Age of Acceleration. Remember I showed you this graph in December of 2023? There's that graph again. Let me show you what I mean. So this is back when I was writing that paper, right? GPT-2, GPT-3. Rings a bell, right? It looks like the same graph. We really are that crazy exponential. In fact, we have been for a while. You can see 120 years of Moore's Law. I'm sure everybody here knows Moore's Law. That's logarithmic. That's why it looks linear, but it truly is exponential. That's what's driving all the progress we see in AI, is just our ability to grasp, take advantage of all the extra compute power that we're building up year after year. In fact, it goes a lot further than just compute power. You can look at the adoption of all technology across, this is the US, but really across the world, and you see that our adoption of technology, everything from the telephone to the PC to where we are today with smartphones and with AI, has been getting more and more rapid. It goes back much further, and this is where I'd love to kind of pull back and look at the bigger picture here. When you look at the history of progress, human progress, you go all the way back to the Stone Age with stone tools. You see these same compounding S-curves that are lifting humanity to new heights at ever-increasing rates. This is my favorite graph. This is from the Singularity is Near. You look at the entire history of life in the universe. our 4.2, it's either somewhere between 3.8 and 4.2 billion year history of life on Earth, and you plot out the most significant moments in our history, it follows that same logarithmic or exponential curve. Again, we're on a logarithmic scale here. Things really are speeding up, even when you look at the entire history of life in the universe. Of course, I can bring this back to AI. I'm going to bring it back down in scope now. This is our distorted view of intelligence, where we think that the distance between Einstein and a chimp, for instance, is super great, right? And we're still at that maybe basic chimp. This is back in 2015, so maybe we're a dumb human now. That gap is a lot smaller than we think. In fact, that's a lot more what the graph looks like. And I'd say we're just about in that dumb human to Einstein level. In fact, I can show you another graph that proves exactly that point. I love this weekly IQ test that they do for all the latest frontier AI models. This is happening right now. This is in late 2024. You see the frontier models were about 100 IQ, right? Average human level IQ. 2025, where we are now, this is in April of 2025, the best models, O3, are over 2 standard deviations above average human. They are nearing superhuman levels. And I can say, like, anecdotally myself, I've had this profound shift in how I approach using AI. Given you know what the caveats are, I've accepted that by and large, AI is more intelligent than I am, and I defer to its thoughts and its opinions as long as I give it the right context and understand the caveats more and more nowadays. And it's really been a crazy shift that's happened to me specifically in the last 3 to 6 months. It's happening now. Anthropic's Dario Amodei, this quote was making the rounds. This was like, what, about a week ago? Almost exactly a week ago. 50% of all white-collar jobs gone in the next 5 years. I told you that here in tech, we are where the future is happening fastest, right? In fact, you already see that with big tech. Big tech hiring is already down 50%. Like, it is happening now, and we're getting to that wall in the exponential, that knee or the elbow in the curve, as you see in that bottom right corner. This is one more way to look at that elbow in the curve. This is how I like to view it, and this is what I think is most salient to me. We have technological progress or environmental change over time. This is how quickly technology is moving. That follows our exponential, right? Rate of change is increasing at an ever-increasing rate. You look at our collective human capacity to adapt to that change. At best, it's maybe slightly linear up. It's probably more likely flat or even down. Some people argue that we're becoming less able to adapt to new technology as our society simply scales, becomes larger and harder to move. I call this the trust gap right there. That is the trust gap. Alvin Toffler, this is a great book that he wrote back in 1970, pointed out much the same issue. And what he calls it is future shock. Maybe everybody's heard of culture shock before. It is culture shock applied to our ability to adapt to the future in general. That trust gap is huge, and let me point it out to you more specifically. Gallup tracks trust across 62 different metrics, 62 different indicators across the US, and has been doing so for decades now. When you look at all these metrics, 60 out of 62 Gallup indicators are at or near all-time lows right now. This is the bellwether, right? This is the trust gap we see, and you can feel it, right? You can feel that trust in our institutions, trust in our government, trust in big organizations, trust in our healthcare systems, trust in our economy. All of this stuff is at all-time lows. The only two that aren't, small business and the military are the only two that aren't. You see, unfortunately, large technology companies and tech in general is not faring any better. So why is trust eroding? I've been reading a lot about this recently. If you know me well, I like to read books. I read somewhere between 50 and 100 books a year. This is a book that I read recently, American Breakdown. It came out in 2023, talking specifically about those 62 Gallup polls and what his theory is for why we see this. He points out 3 reasons. One is the elite gulf, the gulf between globalists and nationalists specifically. You can see that, what's going on right now with trade wars and tariffs. sheer size. When you look at the size of organizations, that's governments, that's the biggest companies out there now. In general, they're larger, they have a greater share of the economy than they've ever had before. That leads to a certain sense of remoteness and lack of control or lack of agency when you look at how gargantuan these companies are and organizations in general. Third is the internet, specifically pointing out the attention economy and how that collapses what the sirens call, what Chris Hayes calls attentional regimes. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. Again, it kind of goes back to remoteness here. I'm going to add one more, which is based on the graphs that we saw. When things move faster, when technology is progressing faster, uncertainty increases, right? With acceleration, increases uncertainty. And with uncertainty, you have to rely more on trust. There needs to be more trust, or else fear grows in that gap. This is actually a presentation that I ended up I was fortunate enough to give to my alma mater a couple weeks ago. I got to speak to dozens of students who were in high school, and it's a perspective that I rarely get now, right? Now that I'm here in Silicon Valley. And a fascinating thing that I heard is just how uncertain high school students are right now. I'm sure a lot of people here have children as well, just how much uncertainty there is for people who are choosing their majors or trying to figure out, what is the world going to look like in 4 years? And how do I make sure, even when I'm going into college, that I'm taking the right curriculum, that I'm preparing myself for a future that is so incredibly unknown? I'll tell you that CS degrees are nearing all-time lows right now. There's been a huge bell curve down. Everybody's going into other more tangible, like working with your hands industries. Whose fault is this? It is certainly not the individuals. You can point out particular companies or governments. It is so much bigger than that, right? At this point, when you can point out so many different incidences, it's really the systems. It's the systems that we rely on that have not been keeping up to date with this rate of technological change and everything we see around us. So how do we restore trust? I'm going to point to another book because I love books. This book is Bowling Alone. It's like a seminal book on the history of community in the United States from really its peak in social capital and community in the 1950s after the war, all the way until now. Robert Putnam goes into a lot of stats, breaks down a lot of details as to why we're seeing social capital and trust at all-time lows. His solution is the same sort of set of recommendations that you see for the previous book that I was referencing. It comes down to upgrading our systems, right? And specifically these two things. And I'm going to go into detail in just a second. Nearness, that's increasing understanding, our belonging, our sense of shared humanity, bringing people together. It is just so much easier to bring that shared humanity when we're all close together. Second is giving a sense of co-creation. We're all building this together, right? There's not that remoteness, and you don't see those big tech companies that feel like you have no sort of say in what's going on. It's about creating senses of shared ownership, being more transparent, and holding people and organizations accountable. There we go. Okay, I'm going to go into 4 specific points that I think we do to restore trust. And these are things that I've, again, thought deeply about and care a lot about, and I think that these are the directions that we're trying to move in. One is, as I said, building nearness, understanding, belonging, and shared humanity through events and community. That's the core, one of the cores of what we're doing right now. Second is creating forums for better attentional regimes. And this is in contrast to what you see online. Think about the types of complex, nuanced dialogue that you can have on Twitter or in the YouTube comments section or Reddit versus what you can have in person, right? You can have just fundamentally different types of conversations when you are in person versus when you are online. That's how we create forums for better attentional regimes. This is how we tackle complex, nuanced discussion around these critical questions. There's a lot of personal exploration. That's why I included that in parentheses. There's a lot of personal exploration that has to go on as well as asking the broader questions. Number 3 is taking those insights, hoisting those battle-tested insights, ideas, and sentiments from us, the pioneers in the frontier, and harnessing that collective wisdom that's presenting these insights to decision makers, government, to industry leaders, to the public at large. And then finally is upgrading our institutions and stewarding the society around us. That's taking these insights and actually turning them into real action. That's a lofty goal, right? Those are 4 big things to do. That's a lot to accomplish. If all else fails, here's a Milton Friedman quote. Only a crisis, actual or perceived, produces real change. When that crisis occurs, the actions that are taken depend on the ideas that are lying around. That, I believe, is our basic function, to develop alternatives to existing policies, to keep them alive and available until the politically impossible becomes the politically inevitable. We are stewards of the future. I firmly believe that us pioneers on the frontier, we are stewards of the future. I had this realization back in 2020, 2021, writing my final paper, and I've been wrestling with what a solution, a possible solution to this challenge is. And it's only been through this community, through writing this manifesto, through thinking about it after years and years now, that I think we are closer collectively than ever to finding that solution. It's actually the same thing that Alvin Toffler pointed out in his book back in 1970, Future Shock. It's about the people who are closest to the technology, closest to the frontier, who can see around corners, right? Who are living in that future already. It's our responsibility to peer ahead, to ask the difficult questions, to think about what possible solutions are, and to take a strong sense of responsibility, not just about the technology we're building, but about the future that we're creating. That's what we're trying to create. Once again, you can go read the whole founding perspective at our website. I'd really appreciate if you did. I know it'll probably take some time because it's quite lengthy, but it's something that I've poured my heart and soul into, and I hope it leads to something.